Welcome to Exploring Digital with Purr, a podcast for entrepreneurs and CEOs who want their businesses to benefit from a digital-first approach. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Exploring Digital with Purr. I'm joined today by Samuel Hunt, who's the co-founder and managing director of Materials Market. Hi, Samuel.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Really well, and you?
Good. Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well.
So this content collaboration podcast episode today has been a long time in the offing. We've been talking about doing it for a really long time, and I guess we can kick off by saying that we're at least allowed to now publicly discuss what you're doing, which has been very exciting for the last 13 months, talking about it behind closed doors. But do you want to explain a little bit about what Materials Market is and how you came to start it?
Sure, absolutely. So my background is university dropout, and I went straight into the building industry, which is probably up there with, if someone had asked me at the time, what industry do you think you're going to go in when you're older, it's probably up there with medicine as like the least likely. So it's funny how it works out, really. But I wanted to quit uni and I needed to get a job because my dad wouldn't let me leave unless I had one. So I got a job buying building materials for a roofing contractor. Basically, what that entails is just going in every single day and trying to source roofing felt, insulation, loads of different construction products, and get them delivered to site on time and on budget. And it's a 9-hour a day job on the phone, on the emails, and I got to the end of sort of two and a half years of it, and I thought, this seems like a very laborious way to do things. I thought, well, surely, because I'm the customer, right, and I always know what I want to buy, and why am I calling up like 10 different people? Usually 5 of them didn't have the materials I needed in stock anyway, so I'm just wasting their time, and they're wasting my time, even having that conversation. A few of them can't do a competitive price, and realistically, there's only 1 or 2 that can get it there at the date that I need it, and at the price that I need. So rather than me going out and doing all the work, I thought, well, why can't I just create a website called samuelhuntbuying.com or whatever? I'll just put up what I need every day, and then suppliers, those that are interested in doing it, can like offer me a price and offer me a delivery date, and those that aren't can just ignore it. And it would save me a whole lot of time, because I could just come in every morning, see what offers I've had, pick the best ones for me, place orders, and then get on with my day. So the idea kind of came from that frustration. I think all good ideas are born out of frustration. And so that was kind of like my frustration as a buyer. And then I went into distribution then. So I was basically on the other side of the coin. I was selling building materials back to the contractor that I'd been and the buyer that I'd been. And I saw a load of issues on the supply side as well, and a lot of frustrations with connecting to the right customers. So like a couple of examples, we wanted to take large orders going to specific locations where our trucks could get in and out fairly quickly. But what we found ourselves doing was dealing with a lot of small orders, because we couldn't always connect with the people that needed those larger deliveries. And so there seemed to be sort of this lack of communication and a lack of transparency and a lack of movement of information in the construction industry that made it difficult for a customer to connect with the supplier who was perfect to supply their order. Like we had dead stock lying out in the yard for 3 months. I knew there was someone in the United Kingdom buying it, because there was bound to be, but I couldn't find them. So we ended up selling it at like a knockdown price just to get rid of it. And actually, if we'd been able to find someone that wanted to buy it, we could have sold it at the price that it should have been sold at, because there was that desire there. So throughout this process, I basically just thought this website could really solve a lot of problems on both sides, for both parties. And my co-founder Andrew, who came along really 2 months after I had the idea, whatever, and we started building the company. We started building the idea from there. But it was only in the last year. This was like 4 years ago. It was only in the last year that we managed to scrape some money together to build the software. Much to your benefit, I must say.
Yes, it's probably worth clarifying at this point that we are as Materials Market's development agency, and have been working on their minimum viable product for a little over a year. We went through 2 phases of development. getting it, one, to a sort of MVP that was good enough for them, and two, to then getting it into a form that could be commercialized. And we went live a couple of weeks ago, and I was pleased to hear that there's money coming into the account, which is very
Yeah.
good news.
Yeah, the account nearly had a heart attack. It didn't know what to do with incoming funds. It was just used to outgoings. So yeah.
So going back a moment to your description of the B2B kind of market within the construction industry, I mean, it seems quite backwards. Just I was a newcomer to this world when you came to me with the idea, and I didn't appreciate just how antiquated some of the methodology was, how labor intensive it was, and it seemed for an industry that moves billions of pounds of material around the country, annually.
Sure.
It was crying out for some better system, and you were kind of thinking, well, surely the big players have got a better system. No, everyone is as reliant on these really old fashioned processes, and yeah, we keep on discovering kind of bits of industries that fall down on this basis, and you just think there's so many efficiencies that could be made, time saving, wastage. As you say, you've got product going bad. That's no good. The shelf life, again, you don't appreciate necessarily the shelf life of some building materials is finite.
Yeah.
You've got to keep things moving.
I think it's like, what happens in the construction industry is not exclusive to the industry, but there is a prevalence in the construction industry where you have like chains and chains and chains of supply before the product actually finds its way to the customer. And every chain has to put a bit of margin on top of it, in order to make it worth their while. So what the traditional chain should really be: manufacturer produces the product and then sells it to a distributor or a merchant, and then they sell it to the customer. But oftentimes you'll get manufacturer sells it to distributor or merchant, and then they sell it to another merchant who doesn't have an account with that manufacturer to then sell it to their customer, or even maybe sell it to an online site who then resells it again. No one's making much money at any of these junctures because there is a cap on how much the product can cost when it gets to the actual market. But what it means, right, is that the customer thinks he's talking to the person that's going to be actually driving there and delivering his product, but he's not actually talking directly to them. He's talking to someone who's then talking to them, or someone who's talking to them and talking to them. And so it's a bit like Chinese whispers. By the time what that customer's asked for gets all the way to the person who's actually going to be delivering it, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation, which means the service level is often quite poor. So part of what we wanted to do, as well as kind of creating something more transparent and more competitive, what we wanted to do was connect the customer directly to the supplier that's going to be doing their order, because there should only be one connection there. There shouldn't be these lines and lines of communication. And what we're trying to do is facilitate that transaction, rather than kind of stand in the way of it. We're not another chain. We're not another agent in that chain. We're kind of creating the market instead. And that's really important.
So when you kind of identified this opportunity, you and Andrew, a couple of years ago, two non-technical co-founders of what is intended to, well, it was originally intended to be a technical startup. How did you begin that journey of trying to get the product developed? What was your journey, I guess, to ending up working with us and us getting this live?
Sure. Yeah. I think you're 100% right. We had no technical expertise at all. Andrew's more technical than me, but we're still, not developers and have no experience in it. The first thing we did really was do what anyone else does, which is speak to our friends and see if anyone has any experience and see if anyone can recommend someone. Andrew had a cousin in the United States who helped us out a little bit right at the start, but he was very busy with his, high-flying job and couldn't dedicate the time that was obviously needed towards it. And we didn't have any cash at the time really, so we were kind of looking to do something on an options basis, but we hadn't even incorporated the company. We were basically, we were floundering around a little bit, and we kind of just got to a point and said, look, we're either going to do this or we're not. And so we just started looking online. So we started looking online at forums and like Indeed, and just to try and find a developer or an agency that we could work with. And the first person that picked it up actually was a connection of ours, and they suggested building it in Magento, which is the marketplace software. And the price was quite attractive, but we took some other advice for some other people, and this was before we spoke to you, and they said, look, if you try and build this in Magento, if you don't build it as a bespoke product, you're really going to struggle to make it work, because it might work to start with, but when you try and expand the product further on down the line, you're going to have serious issues. And they've seen loads of companies throw 30, 40, 50 grand trying to get something to work in Magento, only to just have to scrap the whole thing and start again. So sometimes we look back at the path we've taken and think, wow, we really dodged a bullet there. And then obviously when we met with you guys, I think Andrew literally found your name online. And then I thought, Nick sounds like a sensible guy. And I also liked the fact that you had an office in Fitzrovia. So I thought, look, if it all goes to pot, I'm 25 minutes away. I can just drive down there and, bash the door down. So that was quite attractive to us as well. And
had an office in Fitzrovia.
Had an office in Fitzrovia. I know. Yeah, you've since moved out, but I'm still looking for your existing address. I'm sure I'll get it at some point. But yeah, I mean, So we kind of just started speaking to various people, and I think the meeting that we had with you guys, we were attracted by the fact that you wanted to build it from scratch on Ruby on Rails, which, as we understood it, sat somewhere in between JavaScript and that other one that no one uses anymore. So it wasn't going to be overly expensive, but it wasn't going to be a really rubbish product that we were going to have to revamp in the next 5 years. So yeah.
Well, we'll come to that later. We can talk revamps, but no, it's interesting to hear the part of the story I hadn't heard before, the part about Magento, and certainly it's a discussion we have quite often with people. Any kind of startup concept that involves an e-commerce element, is it an e-commerce website or is it something more? If it is only ever going to be a transactional, you buy this product, the order is fulfilled, then absolutely a Magento or a Shopify option will work really well, and there are plenty of specialist agencies who are really good at churning those out. But I'd like to think our strengths are in doing something a little bit different. Someone was asking me the other day about, do you do e-commerce? And I was like, well, yeah, but no, we don't do a website where you buy products, but we'll do all sorts of things that involve a transaction.
Yeah.
What was nice about Materials Market is you had a really clear idea from very early on about what you needed that transactional element to be in terms of the marketplace, the division of funds, the automation of the processes, and I think that's something I'd definitely recommend to other people in your situation, is that even if you don't have that option of a technical co-founder, and you're going to an agency, being as clear as you can possibly be on paper and turning your thoughts into diagrams and process process charts, all of those things, that was really helpful, because we were able to map it out from the very beginning and turn that into a process. I always describe the logic of sort of turning a business concept into programming as pretty hard. Most people never refine their business thinking to the level where it's an if-else statement. And getting that going really early on is crucial, I think, for an MVP.
Yeah, it was funny because we had a first meeting with just the three of us, and we'd sent you a 15-page overview of what we wanted, and it was written on Microsoft Word, and it was sort of like this horrible shadings that I'd used in these boxes, not even like nice colors like Excel. And you said, the good news is, Samuel, you're more prepared than 90% of the people that come through this door. And I was like, what are these people doing? I mean, I felt extremely underprepared and embarrassed to be handing this over. I said to Andrew, they're going to laugh at us, but actually, so that was a bit of a moment for us. And we thought, actually, maybe we can do this, and maybe we are more prepared than we think. We'd had 3 years to think about it, so.
Yeah, 3. I mean, it's also interesting to think that in an industry that moves so much money around and so much material around, in 3 years, it's not like that there was a competitor that entered the market that was really challenging the concept of what you were doing. No one beat you to it.
No. I mean, we kind of, I spent a long time waking up every morning thinking that I was going to see it online. And look, I'm not going to say that there aren't a lot of companies that sell building products online and do a very good job. There are, but we haven't yet seen an incarnation that does it quite the way we do it, with a sort of price and application. And I think also it's because everyone out there who's, well, not everyone, this is a generalization, but a lot of startups out there, they want to find the new thing in social media, they want to find the new thing in Uber made travel cool now, so now that's cool, you know. But there just didn't seem to be many people innovating in this space, and the market is just, it's such a huge market in the UK. I mean, the kind of specific market that we're looking at just on supply is over about 35 billion, you know. So it just was quite interesting that there wasn't really anyone trying to kind of innovate and change things up a bit. So we were very lucky that no one came and did anything in those 3 years, you know. And maybe they have done, and they'll be launching next week, you know. So
Well, first to market advantage, always
yes,
helpful.
yes,
I think another interesting point to touch on is that you're one of the few tech startups in my world where you've managed to raise some funding. I mean, it's not VC funding yet, but you've managed to get external investment at a very early stage, pre-revenue. Yes, you did have a form of MVP, but investors in the UK traditionally like to see a bit of revenue beforehand.
sure.
So I'd love to know a little bit about the process that you went through to find that investment, what worked, what didn't, and the sort of things that you think made them go with you rather than someone else.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just to give a bit of context here, I left my full-time job on the 1st of March. So pretty much the worst time to, entering a period of uncertainty in my personal life. And then obviously the whole world went into meltdown about 3 weeks later. So um, I kind of panicked, at the 3 week point, and I thought, God, because I'd said, okay, well, I'm going to give myself 4 or 5 months to get investment together. And then it looked like during those 4 or 5 months was going to be the worst time ever to try and raise money, especially like you said, for a pre-revenue company, because of course investors still want someone to put their cash, but they're much more risk averse in times of financial turmoil. So we really thought that we'd struggle to get anyone to put money in pre-revenue. But we were a bit of a catch-22 because we really did need the investment before we felt we could start generating any revenue. So it was a tough one. But I mean, my process was fairly simple. It's pretty much what I've done with everything else. Is I just came up with a huge list of names that I knew. And I started with that, and I started ringing people that I knew and getting all the free advice that I could. We got a lot of great feedback from a lot of friends and family friends who helped us with the financials, cash flow, etc., and made them look more plausible. And what I did was I started with the least likely person to invest, because I figured that if I start with them at the beginning, I'm going to get all the feedback, so that by the time I get to the most likely person, I'll be a lot stronger than I was 10 people ago. So that was kind of the thought process there, and in the end, what happened was it was a friend of my dad's who was a solicitor who gave me some help, who referred me to another solicitor, who then referred us to our non-executive director, Gavin Leverett, who helped us secure investment. So it was very much a sort of four-chain process, and to two people we never even had met before. But Gavin had some experience in the construction industry, so I think it was important that the investment came from someone in the industry. I did speak to quite a few non-industry investors, private individuals, and I'm not saying they didn't get it, but I don't think it's hard to explain the construction industry to someone outside it, and obviously that's the challenge for the founder and the person seeking investment. But I think it helped that we had that context, and yeah, it wasn't easy to find anyone who's willing to put any money in at this point, but we closed our round 4 weeks ago or whatever, and so we were very pleased with that. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations on getting funding in a pandemic. I mean, that's a hell of an achievement, and if you can get through that, I'm sure year one of business will be a dream by comparison.
Yes, hopefully. Yeah.
There are some things that are really special about materials market, I think, that you've come up with, and things that people haven't seen before in the market. So, are you happy to talk about those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I must say that kudos must go to Purr here as well, because they put into reality all the kind of things that we had in our head and managed to put down on a diagram. And it was interesting working with Kate and James, obviously, who was there previously, to put these things into action. Because I remember James saying, "Oh, I haven't actually seen that function before," which was really exciting for us, because I think there was a level of naivety that we entered the project with, and I don't think that hurt at all, because we had no idea what was possible and what wasn't possible. So we just dreamed up exactly what we wanted, and with the understanding that, if it wasn't possible, you guys would say so. But, you know, um, for example, one of the functions is, if a customer is looking to buy a particular product, the construction industry works very much that, all manufacturers basically mimic each other's ranges. So if you're buying a certain type of insulation, there'll be at least three options for that insulation, and it has the same properties. Each product basically has the same properties. So if a customer's looking for a particular type of insulation, they might not be aware that there's a couple of other brands out, So we built into the back end of the system the ability for the system to know that, one product is equivalent to another product, and therefore the system can give the suppliers the ability to suggest another product in its place. And of course, you have different measurements. Different products have different, like, square meterage on a roll or a pack. So if a customer asks for a roll of, or 10 rolls of something, and they're looking, the supplier wants to offer them equivalent in a different product, the site has to be able to calculate how much square meterage they need in that equivalent product. So it's kind of simple. None of the mathematics is complicated. But I think what's interesting is the application, of that program, and what it allows in terms of a commercial market. Because when you can start suggesting cheaper products or superior products in terms of performance in place of other products, what you allow is a lot more players to engage in the market. So whereas you might only have two people that do that specific one, if you can open it up to 10, then you're giving the customers a much better experience, and you're giving the suppliers a much better chance to get involved, in the inquiry.
Right.
So it's really interesting how one line of computer code can dramatically change the commercial implications of the product in the marketplace,
Quite. A customer who previously got a previous product because that was the range or the manufacturer carried by their supplier suddenly can learn that there are, potentially better products for them at a better value
Exactly.
through a
Yeah.
marketplace. So was that something that you'd, in terms of the innovation of that process? I know it was something that we discussed throughout, but was that something that you'd kind of found as a bit of a stumbling block when you were selling on the phone or on email? Just kind of was that something you had to kind of get to grips with as a salesman, or as a buyer, the equivalents?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably more relevant when I was working in distribution, because we were selling, and oftentimes, I mean, I learned gradually, but I might not know that one product is equivalent to another, and we might have it sat down there in the warehouse, and I wouldn't even know to offer it because I hadn't done my homework. Whereas obviously the site, you just click on the product and it tells you, what the equivalents are. So it really gives you, it kind of takes that step away for you. It takes the need for that learning, and you would eventually learn, but because it's all there already, it just allows you to engage a lot quicker. So yeah, I think, but I mean, it was something I was always doing when I was working in distribution, and something I was always doing when I was buying. And so it was just really a no-brainer to put it on the website, because it's a massive part of the construction industry. And we wanted to do it that way rather than just sort of typing in a free text box. I hate free text boxes because I just think they're messy and they allow miscommunication to happen. So anytime that we can replace what someone would be saying in a chat function with an actual function that doesn't allow them to make a mistake, we'll seize that opportunity.
Absolutely, yes. Free text boxes normally introduce, a lot of people can be very variable in what they choose to enter into a free text box. So anything that standardizes it is good. When someone's launching a marketplace platform like you've done, I think the challenge they always find is trying to get both suppliers and customers onto the site at the same time. When Uber launched, they were paying drivers to be on the road in their cars so that they had enough availability to entice the customers on. I think it'd be great to touch on how you've managed to make that work, and sort of timed the release of it to different people, and then how you're marketing it to consumers off the back of it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting you bring up Uber, because they are a classic example of a marketplace startup that just really hit the nail on the head. But Uber's problem was much bigger than ours, because their issue was, when a driver is sat in their car using the Uber app, but this was back in the day, he couldn't also be picking up people, hailing at the side of the road. So they had to pay the drivers 50, I think it was 50 quid an hour, just to be on the platform, even when they weren't picking anyone up.
Mm.
because obviously no customer is going to be using it if there's no drivers on there. So they had to sort the supply first, and they had to pay the supply to be there, even when the demand wasn't. So that was one of their biggest sources of cash burn in the early days. And when they entered any new city, that was a huge cash burn for them. Was forcing that market open. Luckily, we didn't have quite the same technical issue because when a supplier is selling on our platform, they're also doing all their usual business, and our platform's just an add-on to them. So they can decide to, if they see an inquiry that they like the look of, they can make an offer on it. And if they see a few that they don't like the look of, they can just ignore it. It's a little bit like the gig economy, if a few Deliveroo drivers don't turn in for work, that day, there's loads of others to do the runs for them. And I think that the exciting thing about this site and what it can offer for the suppliers is that there's essentially no risk selling through the platform, because if they see an inquiry they like, they can get involved, and if they don't, they don't get involved. But obviously, we have to make sure that if they decide not to get involved with that inquiry, that there's another few suppliers in that area who are willing to do that. What you don't want is a customer posting an inquiry and not getting any offers on it because no one's interested in doing it. And that might be a timing thing. Sometimes people are on holiday and they're literally just not looking at the platform, So it's important to make sure there's enough players on there to pick up the slack. But at the same time, you don't want to go overkill on the supply, because at the start your demand is going to be very slim. And if no one's getting orders, or the orders are so watered down that it's sort of one order for every 10 offers or something, then it's not a good experience either. So you have to get the balance right. And I think the approach that we've taken is obviously get the supply first. So I've started approaching suppliers a couple of months ago, and I got those guys onto the platform before we launched and made sure that they could access the platform, so that when customers did start coming to the site, they could make offers. And then our pitch to the customers is obviously one of choice. The fact that they can come on the site. They can post an inquiry, and rather than just buying through one place, or having to browse 5 or 6 different websites, some of which might not even be able to deliver the goods on time because they don't have access to them, they can just post one inquiry, and then they can review a range of options, and they can make decisions not just on price. We also built in a rating system. So suppliers can get rated by customers if they had a good experience, if they had a bad experience. So customer can make a decision based on price, based on delivery time, based on service. That's really what it's about for us. It's that consumer choice. So that's probably how we're marketing it to the general public.
Yeah. Were suppliers kind of concerned when they were signing up that you wouldn't be able to drive enough traffic to the site to get them business? Was that was that a question that they posed, and did you get much objection?
It didn't come up too much, because it's so easy to sign up, because it's a price on application site. They don't even have to give us any prices, so the sign up process is relatively
there's no massive onboarding.
Exactly. The onboarding is fairly straightforward. There obviously were questions about how much traffic we expected to get, and I was very honest with them. I said, look, if I got 30 inquiries or whatever in the first month, then I'd be very happy with it. Obviously, it's then converting those inquiries into orders, but then that's sort of the supply chain's job in a way, because that's dependent on the quality of their response times and the quality of the prices they're giving once the inquiry is there. So yeah, there were definitely concerns about that. But yeah, look, I mean, we've had a good launch. I mean, we're only a couple of weeks in. We've had quite a lot of inquiries. We've had a few orders, which is obviously great. And we're just looking to build on this. But we are in the hardest part right now, because what you're trying to do is create a market that technically doesn't really exist online, so you're having to force both parties into it. Once it starts running and they start bouncing off each other, it becomes a lot easier, because a supplier is making an offer quicker because he's thinking, I'm more likely to get an order. And because he's making an offer quickly, there's better service for the customer. So then the customer's placing more orders. And so the whole thing starts to snowball a bit, But getting that to work is what I knew that we'd need the cash for, So that's why it was important for me, that because if you run out of money halfway through that trying to do that, you're kind of back to square one a little bit,
Certainly, that was one of the early conversations we had about where the budget sat, and if you were going to spend all of that on product, then that wasn't going to help at all. It had to be keeping a good amount aside for the marketing campaign, and then it was great that the investment sort of process worked alongside that and drove it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, having got to this, as you call it, the most difficult stage, do you feel able to plan ahead for the business? I mean, I know you've got all your forecasts that you put together when you were going to get investment, and yeah, they're always finger in the air. But I mean, do you feel like they were a good place to start? And do you still think that you're able to kind of plan ahead in that way and foresee growth properly for the company?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the exciting thing about the model in itself is that it's absolutely perfect for the construction industry, I believe, and a lot of other people think that as well, because the construction industry is one of homogenous products and multiple players. So it's a good product for the construction industry. But what I like about it is that there's other products that could be added to the site, that could be transacted in this way, which is quite an original way of transacting. So there's definitely room for growth into more products in the construction industry. I mean, we're only dealing with a very small portion of
Yeah.
products in the industry. So there's definitely the potential for more growth into other ranges and into other supply chains. And obviously, you have geography. We're really operating in London and the southeast at the moment, because that's where our supply chain is. The aim obviously is to move nationally geographically, but I think that the important thing is that creating that market is easier if you try and concentrate your efforts. If you try and do it across the whole of the UK off the bat, you'd really struggle, because you don't have that ripple effect, and those network effects of those two entities trading with each other. So I mean, I'm very yeah, I wouldn't be wanting to make like too many plans outside of what we have at the moment, until we're confident that we've created somewhat of a marketplace in London and the southeast that is kind of then doesn't need as much nurturing from us. But I wouldn't want to get ahead of myself. We've got enough of a challenge doing this at the moment, but I think it's an interesting product that can be applied to other commercial places
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. And I think the other point I was going to touch on in terms of future for materials market, and then again, a conversation that we've had throughout and we've been quite transparent on, I think, is that assuming this goes really well, there will be a natural place where materials market and Purr don't work together. There'll be a point where the only way to proceed in a viable way as a startup is to build an internal technical team, using the budget that sales has driven, or further investment drives. So um, because lots of startups wouldn't consider working with an agency; they'd only do it by having a technical team. I think it's worth considering. Like, it is a valid approach, and there is a way of transitioning, and it's something I think we've tried to advise on throughout. As part of your investment process, was saying, well, look, here are the technical team, and here's how they can help us build our own internal team following
Sure.
following the launch.
Yeah,
Um,
you're very much the turkeys waiting for Christmas in that respect. You're right. Samuel, I strongly advise you to make plans to ditch us very soon after launching. So no, it wasn't quite that blunt, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting trying to do that, obviously, because both myself and Andrew, although obviously we have more experience, we don't have anything like the level of experience that a CTO would bring to the operation, and so we're very conscious that obviously if you look at things on a purely financial level, it's like, oh, okay, it's a no-brainer. Let's just hire, one programmer. And then the thing is, your programmer arrives in the office for day one, and you're saying what we used to say to you, build this and build that, and they don't have that experience, or they know how to, I wouldn't put it past me to hire a programmer who doesn't even know how to program in the language that the site's built on, So it's those kind of things that we would struggle with, and so it's important to ensure a smooth transition from one phase to the next, and that's why agencies are so good. I think is because you can get that expertise without the burden of a long employment contract, without thinking, okay, well, this person only knows how to program it in this language and only knows these things about programming. So we don't have any of that other knowledge. Whereas an agency obviously has all those factions kind of brought together. And if that developer who's working on your job doesn't know something, they can ask someone else in their team that does.
yeah, completely. It's uh, interesting part of kind of being effectively the early stage CTO for, as a number of the startups we built MVPs for, is that there is a finite window of opportunity to be involved. But there's really two ways that Purr works with startups, and we do quite a bit of work with materials market stage companies, but then also we seem to have this new niche of supporting larger startups post sort of Series A, Series B funding once the engineering team then can't support the marketing team, and keeping the public facing marketing website going. So there's hopefully always some sort of role for us in a startup, but it'll evolve, and we look forward to seeing that happening with materials market and seeing your future success.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree.
So go on, let's get your top tip for a startup founder following your 3 years of effort towards materials market and its eventual launch. Let's refocus it on to a non-technical potential startup founder. What would be your number one tip?
I don't know. I haven't. I guess to focus like 100% on solving the core issue that you set out to, that first like prompted you to create the startup in the first place, and to never lose like that focus with that very sort of granular issue that you're looking to get past, because it's easy to kind of lose sight of that, especially when I got to points in the build and dealing with lawyers and accountants and investors when I said to Andrew, I said, I've forgotten what are we even doing again? I'd forgotten the name of the company or why we even started it, because frankly we'd moved so far past that, and I think that it's just important to keep in the back of your mind that if you thought it would work when you were working in that as a buyer in that construction company, earning 15 grand a year or whatever, if you thought it would work then, there's no reason why it's not going to work now. And actually all the work you've done is to solve that core issue, so it's just kind of don't lose sight of why you first started the company.
Perfect. And I something else you mentioned that I wanted to touch on was just picking up the phone and talking to people, people who are more reticent to talk about their work or their product, for whatever kind of reasons of confidentiality and so on. They're missing out on all the help and advice that people can give them, and it's so good to hear that not only your non-executive director, but also the funding you got happened as a result of talking to people about what you were doing, because people are primarily they're interested and they want to help, right? And especially when it's something exciting and seeing someone do well with it, it's kind of, oh yeah, is there anyone I can match you up with? Oh, there's someone who might be relevant. And having good conversations about things and picking up the phone, I think to build your network as a startup founder are really important steps.
No, 100%. And I think another thing as a startup founder, and I was certainly guilty of this, and still am a little bit, you get a bit paranoid about your idea and you think, oh, it's all about the idea. And if this just occurs to anybody else, it's over for you. Do you know what I mean? Or everyone's going to do it. And that's absolute rubbish. And I realized that when we got out into the market or started thinking about getting out into the market, I actually found a few other companies that, had kind of, they clearly had the same thought that we'd had, they hadn't built the same product, and it's not really about, oh, do you know what the problem is, or have you got an idea? It's how you go about building something that solves that, and you look at one product, and you look at another product, and it's the application really that makes the difference. It's not really the idea.
But also, if you think the idea alone is what makes the startup work, then you've not thought about it enough yet. You haven't yet worked out all the ways in which all the edge cases for that idea and all of the different parts of the journey that will need to be evolved to make it happen.
No, exactly.
Brilliant. All right. Well, Samuel, thank you so much for talking to me. I really hope the materials market is everything we both expect it to be.
Thanks very much, Nick. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Good stuff. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for joining. Remember to subscribe and follow us, and to share today's insights with other businesses who want to stay relevant in a digital-first world.